Learn more. JustProfessor here. You know the worst-case scenario is possible. You've thought about it, but you're not preparing for it because it probably won't happen. Then, one day, it does happen, and you lose everything because you ignored something you knew was real. This is how people ruin their lives while fully aware of the danger. There's a type of risk that most people completely ignore. Not because they don't know about it. They do. But because the probability seems low, they treat it like it's zero. These are called tail risks, unlikely but catastrophic events that sit in the tail ends of probability distributions. A major earthquake, a market crash, a career-ending injury, a house fire. You know these things happen to people, but you act like they'll never happen to you. And when they do, the damage is massive because you did nothing to protect yourself. Tail risk neglect is when you ignore low-probability, high-impact events in your decision-making. You focus on likely scenarios and completely disregard unlikely but devastating possibilities. Your brain treats small probabilities as if they're zero probabilities. A 1% chance feels the same as a 0% chance, even though 1% means it will definitely happen to some people and might happen to you. This creates a dangerous gap in your risk assessment. You prepare for likely problems. You have plans for things that probably will happen, but you have no protection against unlikely catastrophes. And because catastrophic tail events cause so much damage when they occur, failing to prepare for them can destroy everything you've built, even though preparing would have been relatively easy. The math is simple, but your brain doesn't process it correctly. If something has a 1% chance of happening each year, that sounds unlikely. But over 30 years, that's a 26% chance it happens at least once. Over 50 years, it's almost 40%. Low-probability events become fairly likely events over longer time periods. But your brain evaluates the yearly probability and stops thinking about it. Your brain is wired to respond to immediate and probable threats while ignoring distant and improbable ones. This made sense in ancestral environments where long-term low-probability thinking didn't matter much. But in modern life, tail risks can completely destroy your financial security, health, or life. Ignoring them because they're unlikely is irrational, but it's what most people do automatically. Let me show you how tail risk neglect ruins people's lives in completely predictable ways. Insurance is the obvious example. People skip insurance for unlikely events because paying for something that probably won't happen feels like wasted money. They don't get flood insurance because floods are rare. They don't get disability insurance because they're healthy. They minimize liability coverage to save money because getting sued seems unlikely. Then the tail event happens. The flood destroys their house. An injury prevents them from working. Someone sues them. And because they neglected the tail risk, they lose everything. They knew floods happen. They knew injuries happen. They knew lawsuits happen. But 1% annual probability felt like 0%, so they didn't protect themselves. Investment decisions get destroyed by tail risk neglect. Someone puts all their money in one investment or one sector because it's been performing well. They know concentration is risky. They know markets crash. They know companies fail. But these seem like unlikely events, so they ignore them. Then the crash happens or the company fails, and they lose most of their wealth because they had no protection against the tail risk they knew existed. The math was clear from the beginning. Market crashes happen every decade or two. Company failures happen constantly. These aren't mysterious rare events. They're regular occurrences that are just unlikely in any specific year. But people focus on the likely scenario where nothing goes wrong and completely neglect preparing for the unlikely scenario that will eventually arrive. Career planning ignores tail risks constantly. You build your career around one skill or one industry. You know that industries decline and skills become obsolete. You know people lose jobs. But it seems unlikely to happen to you, so you don't diversify your skills or build backup plans. Then, technological change or economic shifts make your expertise irrelevant. and you have nothing to fall back on because you neglected the tail risk. Health decisions are full of tail risk neglect. You know serious health problems can strike anyone. You know early detection matters. You know prevention works. But you skip regular checkups because you feel fine, and serious illness seems unlikely. You didn't maintain healthy habits because heart disease and diabetes feel like things that happen to other people. Then the tail event occurs, and you face a serious health crisis that could have been prevented or caught early if you hadn't neglected the low probability risk. Relationship tail risks get ignored too. You know relationships can end. You know people change. You know life throws unexpected challenges at couples. But you don't have honest conversations about difficult topics because problems seem unlikely. You don't maintain your own identity and interest because needing to stand alone seems improbable. Then the relationship ends, and you're completely unprepared because you treated an unlikely event as an impossible one. Business decisions neglect tail risks in ways that kill companies. A business relies on one major client or one supplier. They know this creates vulnerability. They know clients leave and suppliers fail. But diversifying seems expensive, and the risk seems low. Then they lose the client or supplier, and the business collapses. The tail risk was always there. They just pretended it wasn't worth addressing. Natural disaster preparation is pure tail risk neglect. You live in an earthquake zone but don't secure your furniture or keep emergency supplies. You know, earthquakes happen. The probability in any given year is low, but over decades it's significant. Still, you do nothing because it seems unlikely enough to ignore. When the earthquake comes, you face consequences that simple preparation would have prevented. Cybersecurity for individuals shows the same pattern. You know people get hacked. You know identity theft happens. You know data breaches occur. But you use weak passwords and skip two-factor authentication because getting targeted seems unlikely. Then you get hacked and lose access to accounts or money because you ignored a tail risk that was perfectly predictable even if timing was uncertain. Legal and financial tail risks get neglected until they destroy people. You don't have a will because dying soon seems unlikely. You don't have power of attorney documents because incapacity seems improbable. You don't keep proper records because audits are rare. Then the tail event happens and the lack of preparation creates massive problems that were completely avoidable. The pattern is always the same. People know the risk exists. They understand it could happen. But low probability feels like no probability, so they do nothing. Then, when the unlikely event occurs, they suffer consequences that seem obvious in hindsight but felt negligible beforehand. So, how do you protect yourself from tail risks without becoming paranoid? How do you prepare for unlikely events without wasting resources on excessive worry? First, understand that low probability is not zero probability. A 1% annual chance means it happens to 1 in 100 people each year. You might be that person. Over longer time periods, low probability events become likely. Don't treat small probabilities as impossible. Treat them as real risks that deserve real preparation. Second, focus on catastrophic tail risks, not all tail risks. You can't prepare for every unlikely event. Focus on the ones that would cause catastrophic damage if they occurred. Ask yourself what unlikely events would destroy your finances, health, career, or life. Those are the tail risks worth addressing. Minor inconveniences can be ignored even if they're unlikely. Catastrophes cannot. Third, buy insurance for tail risks you can't afford to absorb. Insurance is literally a tool for transferring tail risk. You pay a small certain cost to avoid a large, uncertain loss. This is rational risk management for catastrophic events. Don't skip insurance to save money on unlikely events. That's exactly when insurance provides the most value. Fourth, diversify across all important areas. Diversification is tail risk protection. Diverse investments protect against market tail risks. Diverse skills protect against career tail risks. Diverse relationships protect against social tail risks. Diversification costs something, but it's insurance against concentrated risks. Fifth, maintain buffers and reserves. Emergency funds are tail risk protection. Having 6 months of expenses saved protects against job loss, health crisis, or other financial tail events. Buffers feel wasteful when nothing goes wrong, but they're essential when tail events occur. Sixth, do the simple preparations that protect against major tail risks. Get proper insurance. Keep emergency supplies. Back up important data. Maintain your health. Have legal documents prepared. These aren't expensive or difficult. They just require acknowledging that unlikely doesn't mean impossible. Seventh, imagine the tail event has already happened. Picture yourself after the earthquake or the job loss or the health crisis, looking back at your current self. What preparation would you wish you'd done? That's what you should do now. Future you, dealing with the tail event, will be grateful that current you took it seriously. Tail risk neglect is making you vulnerable to catastrophic events that you know are real, but treat as impossible. You focus on likely scenarios and ignore unlikely but devastating possibilities. Your brain treats low probability as zero probability, so you don't prepare. Then, when the tail event occurs, and it will occur eventually to enough people that it might be you, the damage is massive because you did nothing to protect yourself. This is completely irrational from a risk management perspective. The expected cost of catastrophic tail events is high, even when probability is low, because the damage is so severe. Spending modest resources on preparation is worthwhile. But people don't think this way. They think about probability alone and ignore magnitude of impact. The consequences of tail risk neglect only become obvious after the tail event occurs. Before that, neglecting tail risk looks fine. You're saving money on insurance. You're not wasting time on unlikely scenarios. You're focused on probable outcomes. Everything seems smart until the improbable event happens and reveals that you gambled with catastrophic risk and lost. Understanding tail risk doesn't mean becoming paranoid about every unlikely possibility. It means recognizing that unlikely events with catastrophic consequences deserve preparation, even though they probably won't happen in any specific time period. Over long enough periods, these events become likely, and even if they remain unlikely, the magnitude of impact justifies reasonable precautions. The next time you're tempted to skip insurance, ignore a risk, or avoid preparation because something seems unlikely, stop and calculate the actual probability over relevant time periods. Think about the damage if it does occur. Ask if you could survive the tail event without preparation. If the answer is no, then the low probability doesn't justify neglecting the risk. Most tail events that destroy people's lives were completely predictable as possibilities. The victims knew floods happen, markets crash, jobs disappear, health fails. They just thought it wouldn't happen to them. That's not a rational assessment. That's tail risk neglect, and it's gambling with catastrophic consequences. Subscribe to learn more about the thinking errors that make you vulnerable to preventable disasters.